Hi, I'm Allie Hamilton, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the Come As You Are podcast. Every week, we'll be talking about some aspect of healing, usually around childhood wounds and complicated familial relationships. The topics will always coincide with my personal essay of the week, and this will be a place where we can take a deep dive together. I'm so thrilled you've joined me and delighted for you to always come as you are. Hi there. Welcome to our talk. Today, the topic is the eagle has landed. And I was writing about the Big Bear Bald Eagle Live Nest Cam 1. And if you haven't seen it, it's pretty amazing. It's just as it sounds, it's a bald eagle live nest cam that is happening in Big Bear, and I'm very late to the party. It's this bald eagle couple, Jackie and Shadow, and there are people who've been following them for years. They lost eggs in 2019 and no, I think they had eggs actually. I think they had eaglets in 2019 and 2022. That's right. And they lost eggs in 23 and 24. And this year they just had 3 eaglets. And it's like the whole people that are following this are just beside themselves with joy. And I had a student, this lovely woman, Barbara, who takes my only in-person class on Sundays. She told me about it last Sunday, and I went and looked and just was completely enamored, and I've been pretty obsessed. It's if you haven't seen it, you are up close and personal. The camera's right there on the nest. The chicks are so adorable, and the mom is just she's amazing. There have been storms happening all week. You know, the cam is on continuously, so you can tune in anytime. And I mean, it was like unbelievable snow, winds, and she's just there protecting her chicks. And the dad is, he's hunting, he's on a branch nearby. He doesn't share the nest with her because there's not enough space. I've gone down I was writing about how it is so good for your brain to be learning new things. And while I have always thought bald eagles are incredible, beautiful, I didn't know a lot about them. And so when I started just, paying attention and watching this incredible family, I wanted to know more, as you do. And so the females are larger, and that's how they're able to protect the chicks. They have space underneath them. They're not like crushing. People are like worrying about whether these chicks are going to be, can they breathe under there? There's actually space underneath, so there's not weight going on them. There's just warmth. And the males are smaller, which makes them more agile hunters, and they're monogamous. If one of the partners dies, they will find a new partner, but otherwise they're monogamous. They usually have one clutch a year. They lay one set of eggs. It's usually 1 to 3 eggs, unless something happens. If something happens and the eggs don't hatch, or something else, happens where they become prey or whatever, then they might try again, but not if they're in colder climates. Then that might be it for the year. So last year and the year before, the eggs did not hatch. I don't know if something else awful happened. I kind of have been so grateful to get to just enjoy what is happening this year that I don't want to look back on any heartbreak from prior years right now. I probably will want to know more at some point, but right now I'm just really grateful to have something so heartwarming and wholesome to kind of tune into anytime. And it's not just me. At any time that you tune in, there's like 50, 60,000 people there. And sometimes the big bear, the people who are there who are, very knowledgeable, they'll do these live talks and they'll answer questions. People were worrying, including me, and I was writing about it in the essay. The third eaglet to hatch is a little behind the other two, and it takes a while for their vision to clear. And so when the feedings were happening, it felt like that third one was kind of like being pushed to the back of the nest and not getting as much fish as the other two. And I was feeling really anxious. I was writing about that. I started to kind of relate to that third eaglet because it felt like the quieter kid who's getting overlooked, the shy kid who's not like speaking up for themselves. It just, I was feeling really anxious about that. And a lot of people were, but it is just that egg hatched last. So that eaglet is not developmentally where the other two are just yet. And it is eating enough. It's, all is well. But it's been a really comforting, beautiful obsession. And I think needed. And so I was writing about that in the context of everything that's happening here in this country. And, it's of course an interesting metaphor. It's like, a bald eagle, right? And that's our symbol here of democracy in America and all of that. So it's really interesting. And there were more things too, like why do we call it a bald eagle when it's not bald? Because bald is the old English word for white. So just learning new things is really good for your brain. And, I was speaking to a neurologist this week for someone else and on behalf of someone else. And she's a memory specialist. And she was saying that really, we tend to think that people in old age just naturally lose their memory, but it has more to do with not keeping those like receptors moving, those synapses firing, because we're not learning new things and we're not challenging ourselves. And it's not so much about crossword puzzles, although, listen, that stuff is great. Wordle, all those things are great. But it's really about learning new things and keeping that elasticity. And so I just thought that was really interesting and good for us all to know. As we're growing up and we're in school, we're learning things all the time. And then as we go out into the world, maybe we're doing like whatever it is that we're doing creatively or professionally. Sometimes you just are so overwhelmed with the things of the day or the things that you need to accomplish. You might not be having the time to learn new things or making the time to do that. But as much as we can to, just remember your brain, it needs to be fed, right? New information. So it's been a welcome relief from all of the other kind of devastating things that we're dealing with here in the United States. And one of those things is this very dizzying, disturbing, disheartening, depressing state of affairs where it's like you've got a country full of people and half of them are looking at a set of circumstances and feeling absolute dismay, disgust, like anxiety, fear, outrage, heartbreak. And the other half are like, this is great. This is what I wanted. I'm psyched, and you and your lib tears and your hysteria, why can't you be happy about all these great things that are happening? It's like, right? It's really, it's just wild and difficult and exhausting. I think for everyone, I think on both sides of the equation, but, part of what has happened here is a kind of shocking erosion of any trust in facts or experts or journalism. And, I remember the first time we had this president in office, he did an interview with Lesley Stahl, and she's written about it. You can Google it. But he told her that the first thing you do is erode the public trust in journalism, because once you get people to not know like what to believe, you're golden. Once people are like, oh, like, legacy media, or like, you can't trust anything, I'm going to just do my own research because I can't believe this newspaper or this journalist or the, then nobody's opinion means anything anymore. And that is certainly what has happened here. And unfortunately, now it's become true. Even like the legacy media has been purchased by billionaires. So, very much like what they set out to do, they've done. We have, we've got people who do listen to Fox News, which is not news. I mean, there was a whole court case about this, and they're using the word news at the end. It's an entertainment channel. And it happens on both sides. These are like, this isn't journalism. When you have networks that are presenting opinions, like MSNBC, very much to the left, right? And we got to be able to like say that openly. There are definitely like extremely left-leaning organizations, and there are extremely right-leaning organizations, and then there's journalism. And journalism was supposed to be the facts, right? I'm not going to give you my opinion. I'm just going to tell you the facts of what's happening here, and that's it. And the facts used to be enough, and then people could use critical thinking and figure out what they thought. But most people could agree that like the Constitution is something really important that we should defend, and that democracy is really important and we should defend it, and that we don't want an authoritarian government here, and we don't want any old like billionaire just walking into the Treasury with, a bunch of kids and flash drives. Like, we used to be able to agree on some just really basic things, and that it made sense to trust epidemiologists or virologists or, scientists, doctors, experts who had spent their lives studying infectious disease or, pandemics when there was a pandemic. Like, we used to be able to agree on some just really basic things that we just can't even do that anymore. We used to be able to agree that we should not align ourselves with dictators. It just probably wasn't a good thing for us to be doing, or that, it's not okay for the president to be selling cars on the White House lawn. Like, it just used to be a thing that we could at least agree on some really basic stuff, and that's no longer how it is. And it's devastating, it's enraging, it's terrifying, it's all the things. And I'm sure from outside this country, it looks absolutely bonkers, right? Like, what is even happening there? I wish I could tell you. I wish I could tell you, but it's been a slow erosion. It's not an overnight thing. I can look back now and see things like that Lesley Stahl, moment, and every other thing. For me personally, and I've talked about it and I've written about it a lot, this man was a non-starter before he came down that escalator. I grew up in New York City. I knew who he was. So did everybody else in New York City, okay? Everyone else in New York City could have told you, this is not a good person. He's unethical. He's absolutely terrible to women, like, not a good person. Just, yeah, like, nobody was confused. Con man, bankrupt, like, will screw you over. You put companies out of business left and right, reneged on contracts and told people to sue them. I mean, nobody was confused, but so I was done. Like, I laughed when he came down the escalator. I was just like, oh, please, that's not going to happen. And joke's on me, joke's on me. So this has been going on a very long time. And here we are, right? Here we are. And, part of where I think sort of like the, continuation of this erosion of things we could agree upon happened during COVID too. It was like a very traumatic experience for all of us to be shut away from each other and to, have a situation where we're all home. That is not something that we were prepared for or expecting or used to. And a lot of people really, it did not go well for them. It was hard on everybody. I was like every day just about online trying to offer like guided meditations and a yoga, like just something like here, like let's move together, let's breathe together. Anything and everything I could do to try to like help people calm their nervous systems and feel some sense of being connected and having community. So it wasn't easy. And then, I, like many, many people, had children at home, like Zooming. So it's not hard to understand why people struggled. But this whole sort of new, intense, I'm going to do my own research. I don't want the government telling me I have to stay home. Don't tell me to put a mask on my face. My body, my choice thing began, which was really just shocking at the time, because those are two very different things. And for a lot of you, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, because anybody who's still confused about it, I'm not going to reach, and anybody who agrees with me doesn't need to hear it. So it's like, but when you're talking about, like putting a mask on or getting a vaccination to protect your fellow people in your community, right? That's one thing. And when you're talking about abortion and abortion bans, that's a different thing, okay? Those are two separate things. Those are not the same things. And that's what happens when you start having conversations with people who support this administration. It goes off into this really weird, there's like this exit ramp into like, whoa, what are we talking about right now? That is not even the topic at hand. I don't even know what we're talking about. Like, why are we talking about that? And I was talking about that a couple of weeks ago too, when you are, having an altercation, an interaction, a disagreement with a narcissist, right? You will, and I'm not saying everybody who's following this administration is a narcissist. I'm just pointing out the fact that when you are having arguments with people who are unwilling to meet you and like stick with the topic at hand, this is what it feels like, right? They're just suddenly talking about something totally different. It's you're in that same, kind of situation where you ask a question or you say something and they come back answering some other question that is not the thing. And so, when we get to a place and you say something like, well, there were clinical trials before they put the vaccinations out. No, there weren't. There were. Here's the link. Like, here's a link to the Pfizer study. Here's a link to, like, you give links with it, they don't like your link. It's like, it doesn't really matter what you do or what you say, or you show like something from, the journal of, they're looking at YouTube, and somehow YouTube is as, meaningful as the New England Journal of Medicine, right? And that's what started to happen during COVID. And I saw a lot of people in the yoga and, quote unquote wellness world going down this pathway. And it was a real shock, you know? I mean, it was really disturbing because I am someone, and I was writing about this, you know, I have been writing my whole life. And I started doing yoga when I was 20, and I have been in that world like, you know, since then. So it's been 34 years. And when I started practicing, I came out of two different households, right? My mom's and my dad's. My mom, she was never like a health food kind of person. She was Diet Coke in the house, and you know, bologna and Miracle Whip and like red delicious apples that were always kind of mealy, and like Twinkies when I was a kid, or, you know, it just wasn't, she would take me to Burger King, like, and at my dad's, it was totally the opposite. It was like pumpernickel, you know, bread and like the peanut butter from the health food store with honey and bananas. And I hated lunches from my dad's. Cut up green peppers. I mean, stuff that's really good for you. And I hated it. And so when I, you know, went out and I started practicing yoga, you know, I'm skipping over like some whole like eating disorder, you know, disordered eating stuff too, because I was taking ballet from the time I was 4 to 16. And so when I hit like my 12, but even younger than that, really, when I was 8, a family member, I won't name, made a comment. I was about to have a chocolate bar, and this person made a comment about, you know, that, and that was it. I like threw that chocolate bar out, and that was it. And that began like the whole sort of disordered eating, body dysmorphia at 8. But I was restricting calories for a long time. But when I got to be 20, I started doing yoga. That was sort of like when I began this exploration and started to understand there's a connection between what you're eating and how you're feeling, right? Like, and I had really just unbelievable migraines. There's so many things going on. And so that is when I started to just really explore that connection between how I was feeding myself and how I was feeling. Now, I'd been vegetarian for a long time, but that was more philosophical, not really, you know, I hadn't done a lot of exploring how to do that well, how to feed myself well. Okay. So by the time I had my son, I had him when I was 36. I was living out in California. I had been a strict vegan for about a dozen years. When I got pregnant, that wasn't going well, and I ended up adding a little bit of mozzarella. Like, I became less strict through my pregnancy. Not wildly less strict, but, you know, a little less strict. And when I had and as I was, you know, pregnant, I was reading all kinds of books because you get more information when your washer dryer is delivered than you do when you know, you have a baby, right? So it's like reading about different approaches and trying to figure out what made sense to me. And when I had him, I was doing like the whole sort of attachment parenting, baby wearing, co-sleeping, you know, that. Now, I've talked about a really tough time getting pregnant. I went to acupuncture. I did all kinds of things. I ended up going to a Western fertility doctor eventually after like over a year of absolute angst and heartache. And I did a round of Clomid and IUI, and I was pregnant 2 weeks later. So, you know, I would always try the Eastern natural, like, you know, let me try to support my body's own system first, always, right? So now I have a baby, I'm exclusively breastfeeding, and I'm saying all these things to you. And if you are a mom, I want you to know, I don't like, this is not me saying this is like how you should do things, okay? This is me saying this is what I did. And I had so many ideas about like what to do or not to do. But it's like, you just have to figure it out as you go. And as long as you are loving your child with your entire heart and doing your best to be present and to really show up and to cherish, these, because it's hard in the beginning. Those first few years are like full on, if you're anything like me, I mean, some people have help. I had no help. I had no family nearby. I didn't have the kind of family I would have been able to really lean on in that way anyway. And, it was just a full immersion, not enough sleep, open to business. Like, it's just, yeah, full on. And so as long as you're just loving your kids and doing the best you can and, being kind to yourself, it's like you're doing it. So this is not me saying this is how you should do it. I'm just trying to give you a little window into where I was at when I had my kids. I was really scared when I had my son of the whole vaccination schedule. I felt like 38 shots in like 2 years, and here I am, like I'm just exclusively breastfeeding him. And by the time he was able to have solid food, then it was like, okay, like I'm mashing up like organic avocado or organic sweet potatoes. I was, no sugars, crossing his lips and, whatever. I was like that's where I was at. And I'm not knocking it if that's where you're at, it's beautiful. I was scared of all that stuff. And I had, thankfully, the most amazing pediatrician. And Edward Malphus, some of you may know him. He's no longer with us. And just one of the most compassionate, just beautiful individuals you ever want to meet in your life. This man would travel to countries where children were not being served, and he would do his best to, every year, and that was like his favorite thing in the world, was to go and travel and try to provide care for children who might not receive it otherwise. Just really living, like meditated. I just lucked into the most amazing pediatrician. And so he was very much like, hey, listen, if anything's worrying you, I will send you studies. I'll send you anything that you want to read before we do any shots. I totally respect how you're feeling, and we'll just, I want you to feel comfortable. I don't want you to feel scared. And we can slow the schedule down. We can do the vaccinations that, I truly feel he has to have to be safe. And we can save some of them for later if you want to. And so he would send me studies. He would send me books to read. And these are like peer-reviewed studies by scientists and doctors. And there's a lot of information there in the world, if you want it, that is from medical journals. Okay? There are, scientists who have been devoting their lives to this stuff. And so there are control groups and, there's like actual information that you can find, that you can get, that is from people who have, from experts, not YouTube experts and not people with no medical background. Okay? For me, pretty clear, if we're talking about putting a vaccination in your kid's arm, you want to be listening to people who have devoted their lives to studying infectious disease like polio, like measles, and not people who have not devoted their lives to that stuff. It's pretty obvious. So we did slow things down. I did talk to him. Now, I had my son in 2006, and that is the same year RFK Jr. was giving interviews in magazines like Salon and Rolling Stone and saying that the big pharma and that the US government had knowingly allowed the pharmaceutical industry to poison a generation of American children. That's like a quote you can Google. And, that fear was very much in the wellness, quote unquote, yoga community that I was in, and that's part of why I was scared. And this autism, that is when that conversation about, thimerosal, the preservative that was in vaccines that is not any longer, it's not in modern vaccines anymore, was part of the conversation. And that is when this whole concern about the connection between the MMR vaccine and autism really took on this heat. You had people like Jenny McCarthy out there, talking about it. Now, part of what happened is that the timing of when kids were getting the MMR and when kids usually start presenting symptoms is the same. It's around the 15 to 18 month mark is when the MMR vaccine happens. And when you're looking at kids who probably should have some words, right? Should start speaking, should be able to hopefully, right, be making eye contact. And if that's not happening, that's when these diagnoses tend to begin. Sometimes much sooner than that. There's no, formula for this, but very often that is when it'll start to be a factor. Like my child doesn't have any words yet, or isn't really interacting when we have play dates, or isn't, I don't think is really ready to be left at preschool, like isn't doing the things that it seems like they should be doing. And so some of it was timing also. They have thoroughly debunked any connection between the MMR vaccine and autism. They have studied this and studied it and studied it. And, the CDC, the World Health Organization, every certified health organization and doctor and pediatrician out there will tell you there is no connection. It is not that, Yes, cases have gone up, and probably there are some environmental factors that we should be trying to understand. And what happens when you start having these conversations with people who did take the sort of RFK Jr. ramp, off into like do your own researchville and now are supporting the current administration, is that they'll start talking to you about his great work as an environmental lawyer. So now you're trying to talk about measles, right? There's a measles outbreak that started in West Texas, and there are now 2 cases in California, by the way, as of just a few days ago. It spreads like wildfire. We had not had a death from measles in this country since 2000, okay? And the more people opt out of getting these vaccinations, the more of this stuff we're going to see. And we had a death in Texas of a child, and then an unvaccinated adult in New Mexico, and now we have 2 cases, and it's spreading. And there's, I think, 183 cases in Texas total, people who are being hospitalized. And, this is not a game. Measles is not people, it's, I remember parties where people used to like intentionally give their kids measles. No, measles in children can cause blindness, it can cause encephalitis, and it can kill them. You might be thinking about chickenpox, not measles, okay? People, this is not a game. This is not something that you want to be playing with. But there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I was writing about what happened in Samoa. So I shared all that stuff about where I was coming from because I was someone who was scared at the time that I had my son. I was scared of the MMR. No matter what you're reading and you're seeing all these studies and you trust your pediatrician, it's still scary. You are responsible for an entire human being, okay? It's a big, big, humbling responsibility. You love this little person in ways you just cannot even believe. And the thought that you might make a decision that could potentially cause them harm is like devastating and the very last thing you want to do. And so, of course, it's scary, right? I wanted to be as sure as I possibly could that anything I was choosing to do or opting in was like the right and best decision. And for me, If you're trying to figure that out, you count on the experts and you look at the very clear information that is there, the very, clear information, evidence that is available to you over years and years and years, decades of results and studies. And it's not hard to figure out that we have eradicated all of these diseases like polio, like measles, because of vaccines. And all these studies that are showing there is no connection between these vaccines and autism. So you try to have that conversation, and you've got people talking about all this great work he did as an environmental lawyer against like DuPont and Monsanto, right? And how he, got millions in damages awarded to people who were harmed by these companies who were dumping toxic waste into the water supply system and harming human beings who lived in the area in New Jersey, for example, in DuPont, right? Or wildlife habitat, like just absolute toxic cancer cases through the roof, and Monsanto, and with the words gone out of my head, when you're farming and you're putting the pesticide, there we go, no doubt, his Waterkeeper Alliance, all this great work that he did, beautiful. Who would ever argue against any of that? That's wonderful, right? But you also have a person who's been spreading conspiracy theories. So like two things can be true at once. And, obviously he passed the bar. So at some point or another, there's a brain in there that's working, on some level with some stuff. But you also have somebody who put a whale carcass on the roof of his car while his kids are in the car, drove down the freeway, and a person who put a bear cub, like a roadkill bear cub, in the back of his car and left it in Central Park as a prank when he was 60 years old. So, that's not funny. That, I don't even know what it cost the city of New York. That was in 2014. I don't know what it cost the city of New York because they hushed it up because he's a Kennedy. So we'll never know what it cost the city of New York, but literally like two women see this dead bear cub in the jogging path in Central Park. There are not bears in Central Park, okay? So of course they do what you do. They called the police and helicopters and, yellow tape, and a waste of taxpayer money that I am sure was in the millions trying to understand what happened. And it's a prank to this man. He thinks it's funny. It's not funny. It's not a person with like good judgment. So I don't know if it's the brain worm, okay? And I didn't even write about this, but this is a person who overcame, and this goes in the column of credit, but he overcame a 14-year addiction to heroin. So good on you, really good on you. But I don't know what is going on in that brain of his. All I know is this is not somebody with good judgment about a lot of things, and certainly not someone who should be running the Department of Health and Human Services here in this country. Okay? Because while we have people for the first time in 25 years dying of measles, he is talking about how great it is that some fast food chains are not using seed oils for French fries anymore. That's what he wants to talk about. And he's telling people that, vaccines they're good for measles, mumps, rubella. The MMR vaccine is good and it's safe, but it's a personal choice. And cod liver oil and vitamin A are also good. No, they're not. They're not, actually. If you're worried about your kid not getting measles, it's the vaccine that you need, not cod liver oil and not vitamin A. And part of what is so upsetting, and you probably heard some talk about Samoa and what happened there, and I wrote about that too. And you can read about these things, okay? Like, you can go back and read about these things. But in 2018, they were dealing with a real shortage of doctors and nurses there. Their healthcare system was stretched beyond its limits. And there was a nurse on a tiny island in Samoa, and she did not read a label carefully, and she included an expired anesthetic in a vial of MMR vaccine and administered it to a baby, and the baby died from the expired anesthetic that was in the vial. And there was another mother who saw this happen, and the nurse manager convinced her to also have her child vaccinated with the same vial, and the same thing happened. And so they instantly stopped their vaccination program, instantly. They recalled all the MMR vaccines, and the prime minister of Samoa went on Facebook and announced what had happened and said, we're shutting down our vaccine program right now. We've recalled the MMR vaccinations. My heart goes out to the grieving families, and we're investigating these deaths. And a bunch of anti-vax organizations saw the story, seized on it, including RFK's Children's Defense, and there was an activist there on Samoa who reached out to him. He went to visit Samoa in 2019, and basically what he wanted was a control group of unvaccinated kids. That's what he wanted. His theory is unvaccinated children are going to be healthier than vaccinated children. But the only way he can prove that is to have a giant group of unvaccinated children. And the only way he can get that is if he gets a giant group of parents willing to not vaccinate their children. And that's really hard to find. So he goes to Samoa. He meets with the prime minister and the Ministry of Health, the director of the Ministry of Health, very briefly. And they're like, and he's basically trying to convince them to use alternative, I'm sure, cod liver oil and vitamin A, instead. And they're like, you're not a doctor. No, like, we're not interested. And that was it. Okay. So now, that was in April of 2019 that he went. And in September, they had their first case of measles reported. And in, I think, October, there were 20, maybe. It was an outbreak. People were dying. And in November, it was a national emergency, grieving families. Because what had happened is eventually these two nurses that I was telling you about, they were arrested. There was an investigation. It was slow. It took a minute. And they were arrested. They pleaded guilty to manslaughter. The one woman, obviously, she didn't do it on purpose. She just didn't read the label. It's a terrible tragedy. And the nurse manager thought it was just, I guess, the first child just thought it was like an anomaly. I don't know what she was thinking, but I'm sure it was not intentional. And so they went to jail for 5 years. So it was very much publicized at that point, what had happened and why these deaths occurred. And that's what I didn't say here, but I did write. It didn't matter. RFK Jr. continued to sow seeds of doubt about what had caused these deaths. He was not talking about the two nurses and the expired anesthetic and, the fact that they were in jail, that they had pleaded guilty to manslaughter. None of it. He wasn't talking about that. He was continuing to talk about, like, it's not that these, kids haven't been vaccinated. It's like, it's the kids who were vaccinated or like shedding, the virus, or like all this just bunk, and so parents weren't like when the vaccination program re-upped in Samoa, they weren't kind of showing up for it. And then the measles outbreak happened. And then it became a national emergency. And in that space of like when, RFK went in April and was trying to convince them to like, hey, listen, people are they don't want to do the vaccinations. Why don't we do this instead? Like, I can help. I can head up this program. We can track, whatever. And they were like, no, we're not doing that. People need to get vaccinated. That's what we need to do. And that's what has been successful here in this country, shutting down these terribly infectious diseases. Thanks, but no thanks. No one's blaming him for what happened with the measles. I'm merely saying this is a person who was ready to go and take advantage of the fact that people were scared and, try to use that fear as a way to get a control group and encourage people to not get their kids vaccinated. And he's still doing it in our country right now. He's still saying it's a personal choice. And, you can use cod liver oil and vitamin A. And no, you can't. Not if you're trying to protect your kid from measles. No, you can't. So yeah, I think it's really problematic to have somebody saying things like that, heading our health and human, resources department. This is not the person for this job. And people die. It's not a game. People die. And so eventually what ended up happening in Samoa is they were like, everyone's getting vaccinated. That's what's happening. And they managed to get that situation under control. But you're dealing with this level of just a lack of willingness. These vaccines have been studied at length. And continuing to stoke the flames of fear for parents who are already, it's already such a huge, as I was saying, humbling responsibility is really not it. Not it. And then you're like going and doing interviews about French fries. It's like, dude, this was just not the person for this. And when you try to have those conversations with people who support him and they want to talk about, like these old Monsanto and DuPont cases, like, yeah, that's great. This isn't. And this is happening right now. And this was not the job for this person. And also like, I don't know. Like I said, lots of things can be true at once. I think we can understand nuance, right? But you also have a person who's part of a legal team. And, I don't know how much of the work he was doing I don't know. I have no way of knowing. All I know is that, you've got a person who like sexually assaulted his kid's babysitter and thinks it's funny to leave a bear cub in Central Park. This is not a person whose judgment I trust, for sure. So, yeah. That's that part of things. And what is more, I think, alarming even still and difficult and painful is just the lack of, our fates are tied here. And we're in a country together, right? And when you can't agree on some of these, just as I was saying before, like really basic things about how we're going to treat people, and then your fates are tied, it's really hard to just go and have a normal day, right? To go about your business. And, somebody this week asked me, why can't you just be happy about all the money that Doge is finding? And, like that money can be used for good. Okay. Like there's so many things. First of all, I mean, it's like hard to even know where to begin. But what I said is I want you to really ask yourself a question. And I wrote about this too, right? But I said, really stop for a second and just ask yourself this question for a minute. And I want you to answer truthfully. I didn't vote for these people, okay? Imagine for a minute if Harris Walz won and, the first weekend she's in office, you start hearing some really weird rumors that she sent Oprah Winfrey into the Treasury Department with 6 co-eds aged 18 to 24. And one of them has a social media handle, Big Tits, okay? And they've gone into the Treasury Department with flash drives, and they are just taking everybody's social security numbers and sensitive financial information. How would you feel? Would you be okay right now? Because I think we both know you would not be okay. We all know in a reverse situation, anyone who did not vote for it would not be okay. You know, this is not normal. And it's not a question of, I think any American would be like, yeah, let's get rid of waste and fraud and clean up our budget. For sure. You want to send in a bipartisan group of accountants and economists with oversight who are going to report back to Congress and the American people and be transparent with receipts that we can all check, not on, X, okay? Yeah, that would be great. Like with a scalpel, just to carefully get rid of things that are, that would be great. This is not that. There's no background checks on these people. There's no cybersecurity checks. We don't know who they are. They're a bunch of kids. They've made wild mistakes. They're firing people left and right, thousands of people. USAID, like less than 1% of our entire budget. And you can say there was waste in that, there was waste in, okay, you know what? There were also a lot of people being fed. There were people getting water who weren't going to get it any other way. Ebola was being kept like out of this country. And this is me talking aside from doing the right thing with less than 1% of our entire budget, right? Aside from doing the right thing and also like increasing our goodwill across the country, across the world rather, like these are also things that were good for us that are not. They've fired people who were handling our nuclear warheads and tried to rehire them back. They are, writing code and wiping things out and then like, oops, can you come back to work? We didn't mean to fire you. It's like, it is a mess. It's a mess. This is not a good situation going on here. And in a reverse situation, I can promise you, people that hadn't voted for would not be okay. And they'd probably be exercising their Second Amendment rights. Okay? That's probably what we'd be looking at right now. So if we're going to be real about it, let's be real about it. I think we'd be having a bloodbath right now. And, that's terrifying too. But this wouldn't happen in reverse. It wouldn't happen in reverse. Oprah wouldn't be in the Treasury. Oprah wouldn't be on the White House lawn with, Kamala Harris selling cars. That wouldn't be going on. And I think we all know it. What is happening here is not normal. It's not normal and it's not okay. And I can tell you in a reverse situation, if craziness like that were going on, I would be speaking out against it because my allegiance is to this country and not to a particular person. And it is so sad to see people just ready to like swallow anything, agree to anything, refuse to talk about anything as long as they're getting what they want. And, I have to tell you, the people that are supporting this, I don't know. We'll see. I don't think they're going to be happy. Unfortunately, I think it is going to take personal pain. It doesn't seem like seeing what's happening to other people is having much effect at all. Some I'm seeing in some town halls, people, in some red states who clearly did vote for this administration don't seem too happy. And I'm hearing farmers who are very upset right now, and I'm hearing some veterans who are really upset right now. So I think that there are some people who are really regretting their vote, but by and large, it's not a ton. It's not the kind of numbers we would need to make this stop. And we don't have enough Republican senators. We don't have any who are going to defend the Constitution or democracy. I don't know what they're thinking. They're going to be out of a job. They already are. I mean, all these funds that were appropriated by Congress, he's already said, I don't care. He and his buddy Elon, they don't care. They're like, we're doing what we want. You don't control the purse strings anymore anyway. So I don't know what they're thinking, because it's already been made clear that there's no respect given for their jobs. But I guess they're just not getting that memo, or they think that they're going to have this like behind the scenes access and they will get what they want. I don't know, but I think they're in for quite a shock. I don't think they're serving their constituents at all. And this money that, Doge is finding, even those receipts have not been correct by the zeros. They've been adding zeros onto all this supposed waste and fraud they're finding to give tax breaks to billionaires. And if you want to talk about what's going wrong here, I mean, we all have microplastics in our bloodstreams. If you're wondering like why we have all these like cases of so many diseases going up, turning corporations, giving them the same rights we give individuals, like Citizens United, that's probably a really good thing to be looking at. Continuing to give more tax breaks to billionaires here is not the answer. But that's what these people are doing. And you try to have meaningful conversations with people who are supporting this, and it just doesn't, you can't, it doesn't go well. It's really sad. And I don't, I'm stubborn, and I care, and I don't want to give up. And I think facts somehow are going to matter. They're going to get through eventually, or people are going to see the repercussions of what is happening and, eventually realize like, oh, wow, like, Medicaid is being cut, or like my mom can't, Medicare is not going to cover this now, or like all these millions of dead people they were saying are getting Social Security payments actually are not. Like, I think it's going to matter, and maybe like get through, and then we can work together to right the ship before it's too late, and while we still have a democracy. But it doesn't go well. It's like it doesn't matter. They don't believe you. They think you're brainwashed, and you're just, listening to quote unquote legacy media, and you don't have critical thinking skill. Like there's nothing, you can't get through. So I don't know. It's tough. It's really painful here right now, and not at all easy to figure out. It's just like even things like I've got a daughter who is going to go to college in a couple of years, and it's really hard to have those conversations because I don't know what we're going to be dealing with here in 2 years. I don't know what this country's going to look like. We have people who are being removed, and I didn't even write about like the Mahmoud Khalil situation in Columbia University. That's my alma mater. I went to Columbia University. I went to Barnard College at Columbia University, and I have a lot of feelings about all of that. Obviously, I am a free speech, First Amendment, right to protest person, and I'm also able to see nuance, and I can see, that we have a lot of campuses across the country, and whatever's happening there is not going well. You've got a lot of people who are scared, and kids who can't get to class. So there have been plenty of campuses where people are protesting, and there isn't that fear. It's being handled in a different way. I have been really heartbroken to see the way that my alma mater has been managing what, is the right to protest. Like they have not been, in my opinion, and from everything I can see, at a place where I grew up in New York City and I spent 4 years of my life on that campus. It's just really needed to be handled in a better way. We now have a person who has been denied due process. And it is not about whether you agree with him or not. It's taken out, this man is taken out of his home and shuttled off to a detention center in Louisiana in the middle of the night. If you don't speak out against that, it is only a matter of time before somebody you agree with is protesting and they are in a detention center. First Amendment rights and the right to protest and the right to free speech means people have a right to express opinions you may not agree with. That's what you're defending. You're defending their right to express themselves. And if there's evidence, like people are saying, then you present the evidence. There's due process. You don't, abscond somebody away in the middle of the night and not tell their 8 months pregnant wife or their family where they are. They can't talk to their lawyer. They're like, what country are we in right now? This one. And if you are not speaking out and calling your senators and your representatives because you're a little confused about what he stands for, or where he's at, you're confused. Because the bottom line is, do you believe in a person's right to due process? And if there's evidence, do you believe that it should be presented before somebody's just like whipped away or not? It's a problem. So this is like, for me watching this, yeah, I'm heartbroken, and there's all these words that are being used, and they're the most inflammatory words, right? Like, you start talking about anti-Semitism. Listen, you know what? Like, yeah, that's devastating. And two things can be true at once, right? Like, acts of anti-Semitism can be rising in this world. That can be a real and true thing. And what has happened in Gaza is absolutely devastating. Both of those things can be true, right? Like, both of those things can be true at once. But God help you if you try to say that. It's just like, it's wild. And I don't know. You're not, it's like your compassion's only, you can only put it in one direction. It's like you can only, and it goes both ways. You can only have compassion for the devastation. Anybody that can look at what has happened in Gaza and not feel absolutely heartbroken for, these mothers and children, like it's devastating. But also, listen, there were people whose children were at a music festival and people whose families were held hostage. Like, both things are true. And you should be able to say that, right? And not be labeled an anti-Semite or a genocidal maniac. Like, you should be able to express your genuine compassion for people who are suffering because of violence and insanity, But we've gone into a world where, it's really painful. It's really hard to communicate, and to express yourself. And if you can't do that, then there's no bridge to stand on, and there's no way to come together. And that's what they want. That's what they want. These billionaires are the ones who are benefiting from all this screaming. They're the ones. It's not any of us. It is the Jeff Bezos of this world and the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Peter Thiels and the Curtis Yarvins. And listen, you people that think J.D. Vance is charming, you need to really do a little bit of some dig a little deeper, okay? These are not people, this is some Christian nationalist, terrifying Gilead stuff going on here. And, Russell Vogt, and again, you talk about Project 2020 and people, this is it. We're seeing it, okay? What Project 2025 was, and I read it. It was 920 pages, okay? I read it. It's a dismantling of government. They do not like government. They want everything to be privatized. They want one person at the helm, like a CEO. That's what they think. The country should be run like a company with a CEO, which is a slash dictator. They'll tell you themselves. Curtis Yarvin he'll tell you right there. And he's the guy. He's the guy that, J.D. Vance loves him. Peter Thiel loves him. Peter Thiel's the guy who made J.D. Vance happen, put millions and millions of dollars into his races and got him in so he could run as vice president. I mean, just take a look, just do a little tiny bit of research on this. These are all guys that knew each other from the PayPal, eBay days. They're billionaires who they're in it for themselves. And we are pawns. We are nothing to them. They laugh at us because to them, we're like people that don't know how to afford groceries. Boo-hoo. We talk about eggs. We're a joke. And meanwhile, they're taking rockets to Mars. You got to really understand Elon Musk is not your friend. He's not your friend. So I don't know, folks. Go back to the Eagles. Go take a look at Jackie and and Shadow and the Eaglets, because it'll remind you. You'll not just that. I was watching her the other night during the storm. Right, she's just there, steadfast, taking care of her babies, right? She's just there, and there's snow and wind and all this adversity, and she's just there. And I was a little scared, I was a little bit worried. It had to be freezing, and they have much higher body temperature, 105. See, I've got a lot of new information about bald eagles just in my brain. But it is heartening to see, and you do want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and taking care of your nervous system and your mental health, and fighting with people who are determined not to stay on topic, or if not to be in the conversation that you're trying to have. It's just a waste of your energy. You're not going to get through. They're not going to see the light. I feel sure of it now. I've been trying for over a year. I've been trying longer than that, I've been trying for way longer than that. But I mean, really, I've been trying so hard over the last, because I could see this coming. So I was really just even in ways before, I don't know. I've been speaking out for a long time. I mean, I don't know. I don't know, George Floyd. I've gotten to the point in my life where I'm I have these platforms, so I'm going to speak out because I have to be able to live with myself. And I've lost people, and that's fine. It's fine. But if your yoga practice and your spiritual life, whatever, if it's not making it, if you don't feel compelled to speak out when you see human rights violations, people suffering, people saying things that you're that is just blatantly not true. I don't know what's happening, because that's what it's about, right? It's about calling things out and fighting for things that you believe in. And certainly when you see people suffering, speaking up. And certainly if you have more power than someone speaking up. So there's that. But you also have to take care of yourself, because this is it's a marathon, and I don't know what's going to happen here. I don't. But I know that those of us who feel the way that I do, we're in it together, and you gotta, you don't want to end up in a puddle of despair. So I don't know if the Big Bear Bald Eagle Nest Cam 1 is going to be the thing for you, but trying to have coffee with a friend, or read something, read a really good book, or get out, go for a walk if you can, and leave your phone at home, or just do some things. Certainly if you like if it helps you move your body in some way, right? Like yoga for me, just beautiful, right? 'Cause breathing deeply, calming your nervous system, meditation, like anything that you can do to help yourself do it, but also just try to find some peace somewhere, some comfort somewhere, because it's really hard right now. It's hard, and try to be gentle with yourself. And if you need help, you know where to find me. And I'm sending you a whole lot of love. And, yeah, just a whole lot of love. Until next time, I'm pretty easy to find. Okay? Bye for now.